As we gather across distance, let us call upon the one that created us and connects us to all things. God, we call upon you today to be among us, trusting that you already are, trusting that you already know the heartbreak that we have not yet found the words for, trusting that you bear that heartbreak with us. In the long years since the founding of this university, our community has seen dark days before. We know that you accompanied us then, and we know that you will accompany us now. Help us to find the strength to face the uncertain and challenging days ahead with integrity and a faithful orientation towards the most vulnerable in our midst. Help us to meet suffering with tenderness. Help us to face difficult, painful truths about ourselves and our history without recoiling from them, to be receptive to them without defensiveness, and to be activated by them to create a better future. Help us to see with clarity the goodness in our community upon which to draw from, to persevere through these days. Shield our hearts from the inertia of anxiety and let us perceive an expanse of potential, even through the uncertainty and the instability. As we pause to celebrate another year since the founding of our university, may we continue to bring our words and our actions more and more into alignment with our professed values. And may our lives honor and breathe fuller and fuller breath into our shared motto for humanity. Amen.
Greetings. Welcome to our 2021 Founders Day Convocation. Thank you for joining us today. Founders Day remains a long-standing tradition at Wake Forest. It is one of just a few times during the course of the academic year when we gather formally with academic pomp and circumstance to celebrate our university. But beginning last year, we also approached this event and our history with new eyes, deeper awareness, and a growing perspective. This is deliberate and intentional and necessary. Even as we evolve our commemoration of Founders Day, we carry on some of our worthy traditions. We will hear from our senior orator, and we will recognize outstanding individuals in our Wake Forest community through the presentation of the Medallion of Merit, the university's highest honor. Last year, on behalf of this university, I officially recognized and apologized for its participation in the slave economy of the South. That moment was an important step in the critical work of understanding our past and improving our present and creating a promising future. Since then, our community has taken action on a number of fronts to become a more welcoming and equitable campus. While the pandemic could have postponed the progress we had been making, it in fact served to inspire it. And in the last year, we have seen inequities laid bare in our nation quite dramatically, and that has only ignited an urgency to our efforts. Later in this ceremony, the co-chairs of the President's Commission on Race, Equity, and Community, Erica Still and Jose Villalba, will share some of the progress our community has made in the last year. Though we are not able to gather together, I hope you will find this convocation an opportunity to reflect on the story of our past and renew our commitment to work toward progress together. Thank you for being part of this important and ongoing effort. On November 4th, 2019, we celebrated the unveiling and dedication of the Wake Forest University Indigenous Land Acknowledgement Plaque, honoring the indigenous people and tribal nations that call our campus their homelands. To begin our program today, we will hear the first public reading of that acknowledgement. Again, thank you for taking time to be with us today.
Isua emosa he tane twa he kiu he ahui do pe bara we hereni idu pe ni de trade mi Canada shayanere I tu here mi kadi dandere.
This land acknowledgement statement honors the land on which Wake Forest University now resides and the land on which the original campus resided. This place has served as a place of exchange and interaction for Indigenous peoples for centuries, specifically the Sara, Catawba, Cherokee, and Lumbee in this location, and the Shakori, Eno, Sissipahaw, and Occaneechi in the original location. Today, Wake Forest continues to be a place of learning and engagement for Indigenous students, faculty, and staff, regionally, nationally, and globally.
Hello, my name is Laura Denlinger, and I coordinate the Peer Tutoring Program in the Learning Assistance Center, where Julianne Zhu serves as a peer tutor. Not only has she excelled in the classroom, but Julianne makes a daily difference in our Wake Forest community by sharing her experience and knowledge with the students that she meets with. Julianne plays a vital role in the work of the LEC as we strive to help all students achieve academic success. Julianne is from Shanghai and is majoring in music performance and psychology with a minor in German. After graduation, Julianne will continue her study of music in graduate school. I have so enjoyed being Julianne's supervisor, and am excited to introduce her as one of this year's senior orators. Her oration is titled, "The Heart of a Child."
I often joke to my friends that I'm both 5 years old and 500 years old. Considering my awkward social skills, I am 5. While my taste is, in a word, ancient. One of my fondest memories of Wake Forest is of playing Renaissance music in the Collegium Ensemble. It must have enchanted me, because very soon I boldly decided to major in music. But an idea started to daunt me. What if I am no good at it? What if I cannot find a job? We have all heard about how musicians don't make money and their most valuable properties are their instruments. That train of thought went on and on to the point where I basically traced all of my musical experiences. When I was little, it was always a nightmare to learn new pieces because of my appalling coordination. When frustration peaked, I would get off the piano stool, crawl under the dining table, and cry. Then, covered in tears and mucus, I would resume practice, believing that if the worst came to the worst, I would learn the piece by playing it 10,000 times. Even though that sounds like a self-destructive plan, I never doubted that diligence would conquer all. So why do I have doubts now? Did 2 decades of living exhaust my motivation and faith? Where did that child go? Since when am I scared to dream? As children, we used to look around with eager eyes, standing on the tip of our toes, reaching skyward, up and up and up, believing we could fly higher than the stars. Then one day, we grew up. Santa's not real. Hogwarts doesn't exist. I have a final tomorrow. I am not saying that we should live in fantasies, but as we gain the sophistication of an adult, are we also losing the free spirit of a child? We used to be thrilled about the little things in life. We used to know the importance of being earnest. Do you remember the excitement of getting a giant popsicle with an entire month's savings? Or the joy of finally having built a sandcastle after hours of struggle? Do you remember the time when you just wanted to learn for the sake of knowledge, not grades? Children do that every day, but somehow it's a virtue among college students. How about the time when you decided to venture into the woods, got muddy pants, but did not care because you had a glimpse of the most beautiful blue jay you had ever seen? Without knowing, we have become reserved, shrewd, and complacent, simply because we do not like to be viewed as children. "You're such a kid" is one of the harshest criticisms against your character, your competence, and even a denial of your very existence. Striving to be dependable and realistic, we ridicule certain behaviors. We rarely unleash our own emotions. We even censor our thoughts. Suddenly, the world becomes a complicated and even hostile place with ogres lurking around the corners. So what do we do? For it is indeed a dangerous world. What will be our weapon? Perhaps you will find the answer in this story. I spent my first Thanksgiving with a host family. They had a 4-year-old daughter who was exceptionally interested in me and posed question after question, some of them rather offensive if asked by the grown-up. For instance, "Why is your nose so flat?" I tried to explain to her that Asians tend to have flatter facial features. Then she asked, "What are Asians?" Soon I realized that the kid did not understand what race meant. To her, I was not an Asian. I was simply someone with different looks rather than someone of another race. Just like she had blue eyes and fluffy curls, I have dark eyes, straight hair, and apparently a flat nose. She looked at me with such astonishing purity and candor that put any worldliness to shame. Perhaps the heart of a child is the best remedy for hatred and prejudice. Do be aware, though, that being childlike does not equate to being immature and irresponsible. I am by no means encouraging you to whack your friend's head for taking your pencil or to eat 5 chocolate bars at once. On the contrary, each one of us is capable of having the simplicity of a child as well as the refinement of an adult. Here at Wake Forest, we run ANOVA analyses, read Milton, and calculate photon momentum every day. Meanwhile, we throw toilet paper into trees and play humans versus zombies in the library. So yes, we can be adults at mind and children at heart if we refine impulsivity into spontaneity, naivety into sincerity, and obstinacy into resilience. Nevertheless, I think we all realize that compared to the actual adult world, Wake Forest is a shelter. I do not want to sound like a cynic, but when we leave the ivory tower of academia, many of the obstacles we grapple with now might be nothing in comparison. We will be forced to grow up, to make compromises, and to give up airy-fairy notions. But I implore all of us, do not abandon the child inside. It is the purest form of you, audacious yet sensitive, fragile yet unsullied by the bitterness of life. That child will elicit great power, like a ray of light penetrating the deep ocean of exhaustion, deception, and corruption. It is our most precious resource as we embrace the future.
My name is Miles Middleton, Student Body President for the Wake Forest Student Government, and I am honored today to introduce our keynote speakers for our Convocation Day, Dr. Erica Still and Dr. Jose Villalba.
Thank you, Miles, for that introduction. And thank you all for your engagement this afternoon. Erica and I are grateful to be with you today and humbled by the opportunity to help frame not only our institution's history, but also its future. Today's Founders Day Convocation is a bridge of sorts between how we've spent the last few years reckoning with the establishment of this institution and how we will cultivate what we've known and learned into forging a more welcoming and inclusive campus community for all who learn, live, and work at Wake Forest University. Before reflecting on where we are today and where we are headed as a campus community, let us not forget what we have learned and what we have remembered from our university's founding. During last year's Convocation keynote address, Divinity's School Dean Jonathan Walton sounded the clarion call, the warning, lest we forget. What Dean Walton implores us to do is not ignore nor obscure our connection to and dependence on the institution of slavery during the establishment of our university. In his wisdom and guidance, Dean Walton called on us to not sweep what was known under the proverbial rug, but rather that we confront, analyze, process, and commit to righting the wrong that was the original sin of slavery across our land and within the original campus of Wake Forest University. The poignancy of Dean Walton's call to remembrance, a call not of passive thought, but active disruption to the fallacy of exceptionalism, was manifest in Dr. Hatch's formal apology at last year's Convocation on behalf of Wake Forest University for its ties to slavery. In many ways, that history had been obscured and unrecognized for generations of Wake Foresters and North Carolinians, content with not coming to grips with the harsh and uncomfortable truths. Taken as a whole, Wake Forest's history and that of its recognized founders is neither all bad nor all good, but rather very similar to the foundations of this nation, complex and layered, committed to the common good of humanity, but late in recognizing the infinite dignity in all who call this nation home. As we pivot from remembering last year's Convocation and decades worth of exploration and analysis by Wake Forest students, staff members, and faculty alike to reflecting on our present, may we all understand the kinetic nature of remembrance, the cathartic necessity to never forget, and lift up those on whose shoulders we stand. Erica?
Jose, you start us with a call to remember, because we know that we cannot afford to turn our backs on the past. But we have an obligation to the present, to this moment where we find ourselves as well. We situate what we have learned from and about our history within the context of our now, this shifting, changing, living moment. This Founders Day, we find ourselves prompted to reflect on where and who we are. We are invited to consider how we have cared for the legacy that Founders Day honors. Have we built with care, with skillful crafting, making what's been left in our care better? Or have we neglected our inheritance? Convocation gives us a moment to pause and engage these questions, to reflect on both the deep pain and the unlikely, and so maybe more powerful moments of joy that marked this past year. Undoubtedly, this has been a hard year. A global pandemic is even now devastating lives, families, communities, countries, wreaking physical and economic havoc on millions, many of whom were already suffering. Indeed, most of those hardest hit by COVID-19 already bear the additional burden of the racial disparities that really are inevitable in a society mired in histories of white supremacy and anti-Blackness. While much of the country was finally getting used to seeing each other on Zoom, Acts of deadly violence made the injustices against Black and brown people visible. For some, these scenes were a new revelation, even while for many of us, we have never been free to turn our eyes away from them. And then, exhausted by months of angst and anxiety, the norms required for the peaceful transfer of democratic power were challenged almost to their breaking point, symbolized by the US Capitol's literal broken windows, along with all the other damage done and the lives lost. So yes, this Founders Day, we have much to mourn, but that does not capture the fullness of this time. We also have much to appreciate. Jose, do you want to take it from here?
Thank you, Erica. Your reflections on this year can't help but make me think about the hope that is needed in this moment and for many future moments to come. There's an opportunity to take what we have seen as challenges and obstacles and reframe them into power and possibility. And I do not say this lightly, nor am I minimizing the effects that these dueling pandemics have had on our society and within our own campus community. And yet we have had chances and demonstrated success in correcting some of what's needed to be addressed. For example, our fall semester required that students, staff, faculty, and relevant stakeholders act together to head off the brunt of this pandemic. We were challenged, and many times we were stymied by doubt or surges or fear, and yet we did the best we could to complete our on-campus classes and engagement before the holiday break. We also have continued to build on the work of the President's Commission on Race, Equity, and Community. Specifically, working groups have been created to develop plans and strategies for implementing the recommendations put forward by the President's Commission. The work of these groups will lead to actionable, manageable, and meaningful initiatives in line with what we've already implemented through the adoption of the RIDE framework for inclusive excellence, and will demonstrate a tangible commitment to this work. All that we have done to date and all that we have committed to doing will require the engagement of all members of this community and all those who believe in Wake Forest. But it will also need input from those who are skeptical of our commitments and our ability to enact and sustain meaningful change. In this regard, our institution's biggest fans and most strident critics will help guide us on this journey towards inclusion and equity. Erica?
Thank you, Jose, for our final call. We must decide what we will do now. Having remembered our rich and troubled past and reflected on our challenging but hopeful present, we must move into the future with a deep resolve. As you remind us, Jose, there is work to do. We are responsible for carrying on the legacy we acknowledge every time we gather for Founders Day. We are joining generations who have built and shaped Wake Forest, and we must do so with all of the wisdom and the courage we have learned from remembering and reflecting. You said it well, Jose. We need to hold on to hope. That is easier to do when we look to the promise of vaccines, to the chance to welcome our first woman to the university presidency, and to the work more and more of us are doing to be anti-racist and inclusive. We know the road ahead isn't smooth, it's not straight, but we also know we are capable of doing great and necessary things. So let us resolve to take seriously the question, what will you do now? What will we do now? We have better times ahead of us, but we only get there by choosing to, by being courageous enough to make the choice. Again and again, we must decide to act with integrity, to work for justice, and to nurture inclusive communities. Founders Day calls us to remember our foundations, to reflect on what and how we are building of our own lives, our institution, and our society in this moment that is both fraught with struggle and rich with possibility. And then once again, to resolve ourselves to the work, however hard, confident that our efforts matter. Let us then be honest in our remembering, purposeful in our reflecting, and steady in our resolving, all so that we may craft a future in which we can, each and every one of us, be our best selves, contributing to communities where we are welcomed and welcoming, loved and loving, whole and holy.
Thank you, Erica and Jose, for your leadership as our community continues to take steps to make this a more equitable and welcoming place. At this time, it is my pleasure to award the Medallion of Merit. The Medallion of Merit is the university's highest award for service. The individuals who receive this honor make exceptional and significant contributions to the life of Wake Forest and have helped shape the university's direction. Join me as we watch a video about this year's recipient, Donna Boswell.
I came to Wake Forest in 1968. I loved it the minute that I saw it, and it just made the biggest difference in my life to be around people who had ambitions and dreams for their lives. And of course, that's what keeps bringing me back to Wake Forest. The people that I made relationships with became the basis for the bond that I feel to the school today.
She was probably the first white woman to host a Black woman as her guest, and that guest happens to be board member Beth Hopkins, and they're still friends almost 50 years later.
She was so spontaneous, so vivacious. I was convinced that everybody at Wake Forest was like Donna Boswell, and that's the place that I needed to be. I was among the first Black women who would stay in the dormitory, and I wanted to know how it would be for me. And she was very honest in her assessment. She said that she was not overly familiar with how people responded to Black people in a dormitory setting, but that she would always make sure that I was treated fairly. And that's all I needed to hear from her. Because she was so assuring and so warm, I decided to come to Wake Forest.
I was looking for ways to help human beings have richer, fuller lives. And it became the basis for my first career move, taking me into graduate study in psychology and then eventually into college teaching. I ended up teaching at Wesleyan University, which was wonderful. I loved my research, but it seemed to me like it was going to be really slow in getting to be useful. I loved teaching, but if I could get into where I could have a bigger impact, I thought I would have a much more fulfilling life. In the 70s and early 80s, there was really, and there still is, significant problems in people's lives because of the lack of access to healthcare, lack of ability to afford going to a doctor, cultural traditions that make people suspicious of doctors. And these kinds of things have a sort of sneaky impact on people's lives. I got a job at a top-notch policy firm in Washington, D.C., and I stayed there for 25 years practicing healthcare law. That eventually resulted in the enactment of the Affordable Care Act, also today known as Obamacare.
People have an image of lawyers as being hard-bitten and kind of bulldog-like and simply wanting to vindicate their clients at all costs. I don't think that's an accurate image, and Donna is a good example of a person who always has the larger picture in mind. And I certainly think she was a humanist in terms of her public policy, always wanting to serve people in the larger public sphere. She was also a very gracious colleague, helped a lot of people, mentored younger people, and was just the ideal kind of combination of high intellect and collegiality.
I saw that there were a lot of things that I knew about Washington where I could be of use to Wake Forest. So pretty quickly, after I got on the Board of Trustees, I got on the Health Affairs Committee, which is the committee that's involved with our medical school.
Her background in healthcare as a lawyer certainly meant a lot to her service at the medical center and at Wake Forest.
I got deeper and deeper into it and really got involved in trying to help bring about the integration of the med school and the hospital.
Donna is very interested in making Wake Forest a part of the community in Winston-Salem and realizing Pro Humanitate. And Wake Downtown is one way that Wake Forest can do that.
It turned into a whole new way of thinking about Wake Forest's presence in the middle of a more urban environment. So our students could be down there and interact with members of the community and see opportunities for us to practice our motto and really do a better job in Winston-Salem.
She's also been very active in improving student life. She really wants the students at Wake Forest to have the kind of experience she had, even though things are very different now in terms of student expectations and our society in general.
She is a daughter of Wake Forest in every way. The way in which she takes everyone's welfare into account, Donna works steadily to create a better world around her.
A person ought to be given the chance to fulfill their greatest potential. And that's why she's set up and been involved in scholarship programs, and this whole idea of what kind of student should have access to a Wake Forest education has been just very important to Donna.
She sees the big picture for Wake Forest, but she also gets and understands all of the sort of minutia that you have to understand in order to make decisions that are good for our university.
When it came time for her to be elected as the first woman chair of the Board of Trustees, it was just like, of course.
It's obviously a team effort, but I do think Donna is one of the people out there on the board who sort of sets the tone and puts Wake Forest first and thinks long term about the university's best interests.
It's hard to name any major thing that's happened at Wake Forest in the last 7 or 8 years that Donna wasn't a part of.
She pushed us in the best way to realize that, we could have a broadened definition of the Wake Forest community and Wake Forest leaders. And that when we do that, we actually are living out our values by broadening who can be at the table.
She put Wake Forest at her heart and soul. And it was always, how can we make this university better so that the community at large will be better, and therefore the world at large will be better.
Today, we honor an individual whose leadership has helped elevate and shape Wake Forest University and whose extraordinary vision exemplifies our institution's unique blend of tradition and innovation. She first began surmounting boundaries as a Wake Forest student, achieved exceptional success in academia and the law, and inspired and empowered peers and future generations as the first woman chair of the university's Board of Trustees. I'm pleased to recognize Donna Ann Boswell as the 2021 Medallion of Merit recipient. Dr. Boswell enrolled at Wake Forest in 1968, receiving her bachelor's and master's degrees before earning a PhD at Pennsylvania State University, all in psychology. She served 6 years as a professor at Wesleyan University and then earned her JD from the University of Pennsylvania Law School. After teaching, Dr. Boswell joined the law firm Hogan Hartson in Washington, D.C., focusing first on complex mobile phone industry regulation. She then developed expertise in healthcare law, advising hospitals, academic medical centers, research companies, and manufacturers on complex compliance issues. Dr. Boswell rose to partner at her firm and led its merger with a large London-based counterpart before retiring in 2015 and moving to Winston-Salem. She has generously shared her deep healthcare industry experience to advance the interests of the university's medical enterprise and served as chair of the Wake Forest University Health Sciences and Wake Forest University Baptist Medical Center boards, of which board she remains a valued member. Dr. Boswell's efforts to create an equitable student experience began in her earliest days at this university. As a resident advisor for the college's first residential African American students, she advocated for an inclusive environment that empowered her peers. 50 years later, her work towards fostering a welcoming campus climate continues with her appointment as co-chair of the renaming committee initiated by the President's Commission on Race, Equity, and Community. In 2015, Dr. Boswell became the first woman chair of the Board of Trustees, a position she held for 3 years. Dr. Boswell has served as a trustee since 2004, having previously served on the College Board of Visitors. She has contributed generously to Wake Forest for scholarships, faculty support, and medical education, including the establishment of the Donna A. Boswell Presidential Chair of Healthcare Innovation. In gratitude for her 5 decades of devotion to Wake Forest and its mission, for her service as a values-driven leader and role model, and for her continuing efforts to create an inclusive and equitable campus community, Wake Forest University confers its highest honor, the Medallion of Merit, upon Dr. Donna Ann Boswell on the 18th day of February, 2021. Thank you, Dr. Boswell.
As we conclude this service, I would like to offer this Cherokee prayer blessing. May the warm winds of heaven blow softly upon your house. May the Great Spirit bless all who enter there. May your moccasins make happy tracks in many snows, and may the rainbow always descend upon your shoulders. This is our prayer. This is our humble plea. Amen.